Welcome to Horror Drift Stories. Before we start, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. If you're drawn to quiet, shadowy stories, make sure to subscribe. And a small note, you might hear a few ads early on, but after 10 minutes, it's just the story, uninterrupted. Now, get comfortable, let the night take over, and let's drift into the darkness. Story 1. I work at a funeral home in a small town on the Washington coast called Gravesend, and I have finally reached the point where I cannot keep these things to myself anymore. I have tried to be rational about it. I have tried to explain everything away, with stress, lack of sleep, or the strange habits that come from working around death for too long. But the truth is that this place is different. Not in the obvious way people mean when they call a place haunted, and not in the cheap, dramatic way people talk about cursed buildings or ghost stories told around campfires. It is different in a quieter way, a way that settles under your skin and stays there. It makes you feel watched without ever showing you by what. It makes ordinary things feel wrong in ways you cannot explain to anyone who has not stood in these halls after dark. At first, it was small things. A file that should have been in one drawer, turning up in another. Flowers on a casket, arranged differently than I remembered leaving them. A sound in the preparation room when I knew for a fact I was the only person in the building. Those were the kinds of things you can almost laugh off if you catch them at the right time. You tell yourself you were tired. You tell yourself your memory slipped. You tell yourself the old building creaks, and old buildings always have their own noises. But the longer I have worked here, the harder that has become. Because it is not just the small things anymore. There are bigger things now. Things that force me to consider the possibility that the dead here do not always stay where we put them. That is why I started writing everything down. At first, I told myself it was only to keep track of details before time wore them smooth. But if I am honest, I think it is also because I need proof. Not proof for the world, because I doubt anyone outside Gravesend would believe half of this, but proof for myself. Proof that I am not imagining what I see. Proof that the things happening here are real, even if they make no sense. If you have never heard of Gravesend, that is not surprising. Most people have not. It sits on a narrow strip of land between the ocean and a line of dark cliffs where the highway eventually gives up and turns to gravel. If you keep driving past that point, the road gets thinner, the trees crowd closer, and the fog thickens until the world feels smaller and smaller around you. Then, sooner or later, you arrive in Gravesend, whether you meant to or not. The funeral home sits at the very edge of town, which always felt fitting to me. Most people only come through those doors once, and even then, they do not come under their own power. It is an old building, white paint peeling in long strips, dark shutters warped by weather, and a porch that creaks under even careful footsteps. On wet days, which is most days here, the whole place smells like salt, old wood, polish, and flowers that have just started to fade. It is the kind of building that looks like it has been standing there longer than the town itself, as if the houses and shops only grew up around it later. People always imagine funeral homes are frightening places, but the truth is that they are usually quiet, calm even. The dead do not cause trouble, the living do that well enough on their own. Families argue over arrangements. Siblings disagree over costs. Grief makes people say cruel things in soft voices. That is the part outsiders do not understand. The dead are almost always the easiest part of the job. I came back to Gravesend 3 years ago and started working at the funeral home not long after. Sometimes I still think about my college roommate, Elsie, who used to drag me into abandoned buildings and dare me to peek behind locked doors just to see what might be hidden there. She loved forgotten places. She loved anything that felt mysterious or off-limits. Back then, I thought I understood what it meant to be unnerved by a place. I laugh at that now. These days, the only doors I open lead to preparation rooms, casket displays, storage halls, and mausoleum crypts. And what waits behind them is stranger than anything she would ever have dreamed up. My boss, Martin, has owned the place for decades. He is the kind of man who almost disappears into his own stillness. Tall, gray-haired, calm, in a way that can be comforting or unsettling, depending on the moment. He trusts me with most of the daily work now. Paperwork, the preparation room, phone calls, odd jobs around the building, keeping things moving when families are not around. It is steady work, predictable work mostly. Or at least, it is supposed to be. The day Daniel Crow came back began like any other damp evening on the coast. The fog rolled in early that afternoon, drifting off the ocean and climbing the cliffs until it spread through town in a low gray sheet. By sunset, the streets looked unfinished, like the world simply stopped about 50 yards ahead of wherever you stood. Streetlights glowed inside the mist instead of cutting through it. Every sound seemed softer. Even the ocean felt quieter, as though something had pressed a hand over the town and muted it. The body arrived just after 7. The hearse pulled into the lot behind the funeral home, while the sky was still holding on to the last of the evening light. I stepped outside to help bring him in. The air was damp and cold, carrying the smell of salt, wet leaves, and the dark line of forest that crowded the back of the property. The driver handed me the paperwork while we rolled the stretcher through the preparation room doors. According to the hospital papers, he had died of a heart attack about 20 miles inland. Male, late 50s. Standard transfer. Nothing unusual. Then I looked at the name. Daniel Crow. My pen stopped moving in my hand. Gravesend is small enough that names stay with you, especially in this line of work. Some names come through the doors and slip away again. Others stick. Daniel Crow was one of the ones that stuck, because I remembered standing at his burial just last year. It had been one of my first funerals, where Martin let me do more than carry chairs and sort flowers. I remembered the entire day with painful clarity. Rain had fallen from the beginning of the service to the end, a cold, steady sheet that soaked through coats and made the cemetery grass slick as soap. The priest hurried through the words because everyone was miserable. The family stood huddled under umbrellas that kept bending backward in the wind. Daniel's coffin had been dark wood with brass handles, and I remembered the pallbearers struggling to keep their footing as they carried it. I remembered watching it lowered into the grave, water running off the edges of the straps. I remembered the muddy splash of the first handful of dirt. So when I saw his name on the paperwork in front of me, my first thought was not fear. It was clerical error. That happens. Hospitals mix up files. Transfer papers get attached to the wrong body. There are plenty of normal explanations for why a familiar name might show up twice. Maybe it was another man with the same name. Maybe a cousin. Maybe a son named after his father. It was possible. Then I kept reading. Same date of birth. Same hometown. Same everything. My stomach tightened. I stood there in the preparation room looking at him for longer than I should have. He looked ordinary enough. Pale, still, a little thinner than I remembered maybe. But memory plays tricks. A dead face never looks exactly the way a living one did. There is always some difference. The color is wrong. The expression is too still. The body settles into itself in ways the living do not. Still, I could not shake the certainty that I knew him. I left the body where it was and went upstairs to the records room behind the chapel. We keep decades of paper files there, packed into narrow shelves and old binders that smell like dust, ink, and dry cardboard. It took me 10 minutes to find the right folder, maybe less, but it felt longer because I already knew what I was going to see before I opened it. Crow, Daniel. Buried the previous year. North Briar Cemetery. Section C. Plot 14. Everything was there. Death certificate. Burial permit. Service details. Signatures. All proper, all complete, all unquestionable. I took the file downstairs and found Martin in his office. He read it without changing expression, which was very like him. When he finished, he looked through the open office door toward the preparation room and said, almost absently, "I thought he looked familiar." "You remember him?" I asked. "That was the rainy service," he said. I nodded. I checked the records. He was buried last year. Same man. Martin rubbed his forehead with 2 fingers, thinking maybe the family had him moved. "No request ever came through here," I said, "and there would have been paperwork." "There would," he agreed. "That should have been enough to stop everything. In any normal place, it would have. But this is Gravesend, and there is a way people here avoid direct panic. Maybe it is because the town has always felt slightly off, so one more wrong thing does not arrive alone. Maybe people here have learned that some questions are better handled quietly, one step at a time, so we continued. The viewing went ahead as planned. The family came, and none of them acted as if anything was wrong. That unsettled me even more. I watched their faces carefully, looking for some sign of confusion, some pause, some double take when they stepped up to the casket. Nothing. Grief, yes. Red eyes, shaking hands, quiet tears. But no confusion, no shock, no one saying, "Didn't we already do this?" They behaved exactly the way families always do. And I kept finding myself glancing around the room, as if one of the flower stands might disappear when I wasn't looking, as if some other piece of the world might quietly shift to make room for this impossible thing. The burial happened the next day. Of course it rained again. Not heavy at first, just a dull gray drizzle that turned the cemetery pathways slick and dark. North Briar sits a little outside town, where the land tilts toward the trees and the headstones lean in uneven rows as if the earth beneath them has never fully settled. Section C is not far from the older part of the cemetery, and I knew exactly where Daniel's first grave was before we even got there. The new grave had been dug only about 20 feet away. That was close enough to make my skin crawl. As the pallbearers carried the coffin down the path, I looked toward the older stone. It stood there exactly as I remembered it. The rain glazing the surface, the carved letters dark with water. Daniel Crow. The sight of it nearly stopped me where I stood. I tried to focus on the service, but everything felt wrong. It was like watching a scene I had already lived through, only this time something was slightly off in every detail. The priest's voice sounded too distant. The rain seemed heavier than it was. The family's faces blurred together. When the coffin started to lower into the fresh grave, I felt a cold certainty settle over me, that I was standing in the middle of something I was never supposed to witness. After the family left, Martin did not say anything for a while. He waited until the cemetery gates had been closed and the last car was gone. The fog had thickened by then, hanging low over the graves so that the stones looked like shapes pushing up through water. Then he said, Let's check. He did not need to explain which grave he meant. We walked back through the rows of stones, with shovels over our shoulders, the rain still falling lightly through the trees. Digging up a grave in the dark is not something I ever imagined I would do, and certainly not for a reason like that. The soil was soft from the weather, but the roots beneath it slowed us down. Every scrape of the shovel sounded too loud. Every pause felt watched. It was not just fear of getting caught. It felt deeper than that. Like the cemetery itself resented what we were doing. When we reached the coffin, my hands were shaking badly enough that Martin took over prying the lid. I already knew what we were going to find. Still, when he opened it and we looked inside, the sight stole the breath from me. It was empty. No body, no clothing, no bones, nothing but a shallow layer of soil that had sifted in through tiny cracks and settled on the bare lining. The coffin looked as if no one had ever been in it at all. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly on the lid. Wind moved through the branches overhead. Somewhere deeper in the cemetery, something small rustled in the brush. Martin finally let the lid fall shut again and rested both hands on the top of the shovel. His face looked older in that moment. Then he glanced from the old grave to the new one and said very quietly, "Well, I suppose we'll find out soon enough." I stared at him. Find out what? His gaze stayed fixed on the fresh earth where Daniel had just been buried for the second time. "Whether he plans on staying put this time," he said. A shiver went through me so hard that my teeth almost clicked together. Standing there in the rain, between an empty grave and a fresh one, I felt the truth of Gravesend more clearly than I ever had before. The town has rules, even if no one writes them down. The fog hides things. The cliffs keep things in. The people know more than they say, and the dead are not always content with what the living arrange for them. Since then, I have thought back on other things I dismissed too quickly. The sounds at night. The way the building sometimes feels occupied, even when it is empty. The little changes that are easy to laugh off when you only notice one at a time. In another town, maybe Daniel Crow would have been the first impossible thing. In Gravesend, he was only the first impossible thing I could no longer explain away. That was when I truly began writing everything down, because now I know that once you start noticing these things, they notice you back. I do not know what is happening in Gravesend. I do not know why some of the dead do not stay buried. I do not know whether it is the town, the land, the fog, or something older than all three. I only know that this funeral home sits at the edge of a place where the rules are thinner than they should be, and every week brings something else that does not fit with what we believe about death. So I write. I write because memory is slippery here. I write because I do not trust silence anymore. I write because if I keep these stories only in my own head, I am afraid they will change shape, or disappear, or convince me they never happened at all. Maybe this record will keep me sane. Maybe it will do nothing. But I know this much. The funeral home at the edge of Gravesend is not ordinary, and the dead we bring through its doors do not always agree to stay where we leave them. And if Daniel Crow rises again, I have a terrible feeling Martin will not even be surprised. Story 2. I used to think rideshare apps were safer than taxis in every way. They were easier to use, cheaper most of the time, and felt more secure. Everything happened through an app. The route was tracked by GPS. The driver's details were recorded, and even your messages stayed logged. You could share your trip with someone, or even ride with another passenger, which made it feel like there was always some kind of protection. I really believed all of that. Now I know better. What happened to me made me realize that sharing a ride with a stranger can be the most dangerous choice you make. That night, choosing Uber Pool almost got me killed. It started like any normal weekend. I had been out clubbing with my friends, just enjoying life the way you do after college, when everything still feels open and exciting. I felt safe with them. If anything bad ever happened, it would happen in a crowded place like that, right? Surrounded by people who knew me. That's exactly why I didn't think twice about booking a shared ride home. The app showed I could save some money if I chose Uber Pool. It wasn't a huge amount, but enough to make it feel worth it. I figured I'd be riding with at least one other person, which honestly made it feel even safer. There would be someone else there if anything went wrong. So I booked it, said goodbye to my friends, and stepped outside the club to wait. The car arrived quickly. A red Honda Civic pulled up, and I checked the license plate to make sure it matched the app. Everything looked normal. I got in and shut the door behind me. Inside, the car was clean and comfortable. The seats were leather, and there was even a small cooler with free water bottles. It felt like exactly what I expected from a rideshare. Better than a taxi. The driver, Raul, confirmed my name, then started driving, without saying much else. I didn't mind. I wasn't in the mood to talk. I just leaned back and scrolled through my phone while we went to pick up the next passenger. By the time we stopped, I had almost forgotten it was a shared ride. The door opened, and a guy got in next to me. He looked normal, about my age, maybe a little older. He was dressed like he had just come from a hike, wearing outdoor clothes that didn't match my night-out outfit at all. I smiled politely, and he gave me a small, awkward smile back. At first, everything seemed fine. Then, I noticed his ankle. He was holding it carefully, like it hurt. "What happened?" I asked. He shrugged a little. "Probably got bitten by something while hiking. Could have been worse." He tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was worried. He mentioned he was heading to the hospital just to be safe. That made me a little uneasy, but I tried not to think about it too much. We talked for a bit after that. His name was Vince. He seemed nice enough, just tired and uncomfortable. But after a few minutes, something started to feel wrong. He began sweating a lot. His breathing got heavier. He kept touching his head like he was dizzy. At first, I thought maybe he was just dehydrated, so I offered him some medicine and tissues. He laughed and said he was fine. The driver stayed silent the whole time. That was strange to me. You'd think he'd say something, or at least react, but he just kept driving, like none of it mattered. Then things got worse. Vince's condition changed fast. Way too fast. He went from talking normally to mumbling and twitching. His movements became sharp and random. When I looked at his ankle again, it looked horrible. The skin around the bite had turned dark, almost black and purple. I tried to help him again, but he suddenly snapped at me. "Stay away from me," he shouted, pushing himself back against the seat. His voice didn't sound right anymore. He looked terrified, confused, like he didn't know where he was. That's when I started to panic. I tried to check the app to see how far we were from the hospital, but it had frozen. The map wasn't moving. Nothing was updating. "Are we close?" I asked the driver, my voice shaking. That was the first time he responded. Instead of answering, a divider started rising between us and the front seat. A solid barrier. I froze. I didn't even know cars like this could have something like that installed. This wasn't normal. This wasn't part of any rideshare car. The divider locked into place, cutting us off completely. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I started yelling, pounding on the barrier, demanding he stop the car. He didn't respond. Behind me, Vince was getting worse. He was thrashing around, making sounds that didn't even sound human anymore. His body jerked violently, and he kept reacting to the air blowing from the vent like it was hurting him. That's when it hit me. Rabies. I remembered learning about it once. The symptoms, the fear of air, the confusion, the aggression. But it wasn't supposed to happen this fast. Before I could fully process it, Vince lunged at me. He tried to bite me. I screamed and raised my arms to protect myself. The only reason he didn't reach me was because his seatbelt snapped him back into place. For a second. Then it broke. He came at me again. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. Completely locked. I was trapped inside a moving car with someone who was trying to attack me. I grabbed whatever I could. A bottle of water. Without thinking, I opened it and threw the water at him. He reacted instantly. He screamed and recoiled, panicking like the water burned him. That gave me just enough time. I grabbed my heel and smashed the window as hard as I could. It took a few hits, but it finally shattered. I didn't think about anything else. I just jumped. I hit the ground hard, but I got lucky. I landed on grass instead of the road. It hurt, but I was alive. The car didn't stop. It just kept going. At the hospital, they checked me over. I didn't have any bites, no exposure, nothing that could infect me. Physically, I was okay, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I tried to report the driver through the app. That's when I got a message. From him. It was short at first, like a normal reply. Then it changed. He said people were like vermin, that they deserved disease, that he specifically picked up riders from that area because they were likely infected. He said the illness spread fast, and that it only stopped if it found a new victim. I barely had time to read it before the message disappeared. Completely gone. No record of it anywhere. I tried everything to find it again. It was like it had never existed. Uber has no record of the ride, no record of the messages, nothing. It's like it was erased. But I know what happened. There's a driver out there who is using his car to spread something deadly. He's trapping people inside with infected passengers and letting it happen. And the worst part? There was supposed to be another passenger after me. I still think about that, about what they must have walked into when they opened that car door. I don't use rideshare apps anymore. I don't trust them, and if I ever need to get home late at night again, I'd rather walk. Story 3. I got a new job not long ago, or at least, that is the easiest way to say it. Time does not feel very normal to me anymore, so maybe recently is not the right word. Still, that part is not the important part. The job itself was nothing special on paper. It was a tech support position for a big company that makes antivirus and security software. You probably know the kind of company I mean. There is a good chance you or someone you know has one of their programs installed right now. It was the sort of job that sounded safe, boring, and stable. After the endless hiring process, I was just happy to get it. 5 interviews, personality tests, background checks, and the kind of fake-friendly corporate emails that make you feel like you're being judged by a machine. By the time the offer letter finally showed up, I was so relieved I nearly laughed. The pay was better than my last job. The benefits were good. My girlfriend Mary was happier than I was. The night I got the offer, she baked a cake to celebrate. We sat together in our apartment, ate cake, drank wine, and stayed up talking until way past midnight. I remember feeling lucky, really lucky, like maybe my life was finally moving in the right direction. The first day of onboarding was when things started to feel wrong. At first, it was so subtle that I almost ignored it. I wish now that it had stayed that way. I wish it had remained small enough for me to dismiss it as office culture, bad memory, or just nerves from starting somewhere new. But it did not stay small. The first strange moment happened during a break between training sessions. It was one of those long corporate onboarding days, full of presentations, rules, customer service scripts, and videos about company values. I was standing near a vending machine, trying to wake myself up, when a woman about my age came walking over to me. She was tall, brunette, wearing thick black-framed glasses, and she smiled the moment she saw me, like she was happy I was there. She reached out and lightly pulled at my shoulder. "Hey, RJ," she said cheerfully. "How's it going?" I just stared at her. I had never seen her before in my life. At least, I was sure I had not. There were a lot of people around, so for a second I wondered if she had mistaken me for someone else. But she had used my name. Not just that, she sounded like she knew me well, like we had some history. "I'm sorry," I said, stumbling over the words a little. "Are you from the training group? I'm still new here, and I'm not great with faces, so maybe I—" "No, silly," she cut in with a laugh. "I'm from Ops. My name is Katie." She held out her hand, and I shook it because I did not know what else to do. Operations. I had not even been to that part of the building. I barely knew where anything was yet. There was no reason this woman should have known my name, and definitely no reason she should have spoken to me like I was an old friend. I wanted to ask her how she knew me. I wanted to ask why she was acting like that. But before I could say anything, she gave me one more bright smile and walked away. After that, it kept happening. Over the next several days, strangers around the office would stop me and greet me by name. Men, women, younger workers, older workers. Every single one of them acted as if we already knew each other. They would say hello in this personal, casual way, as though we had worked side by side for years. Some would ask how I was doing. Some would joke with me like we had inside stories together. A few even asked me things that sounded personal enough to make my skin crawl. And it was not just a one-time thing. Katie kept showing up too. She was always cheerful, always helpful, always interested in what was going on with me. She would stop by my desk, show up in the cafeteria, catch me in hallways, always smiling, like seeing me had made her day better. In any normal situation, I probably would have been flattered. She was attractive, friendly, easy to talk to, but everything about the way she acted felt too familiar, too fast. At first, I tried to explain it to myself. The company had an internal messaging system, and there was a group chat for new hires. Since I was the newest one, my name stayed at the top of everyone's screen. So, maybe that was it. Maybe people were just being weirdly welcoming. Maybe I was the awkward one. But that explanation did not really work. I had not uploaded a profile picture yet. I had barely spoken in the group chat. And even if people knew my name, how were they acting like they knew my life? That question got answered a few weeks later, and I wish it had not. I was sitting at my desk, finishing some boring training exercise, when someone tapped me on the shoulder from behind. Then a man's voice said, loud and friendly, "If it isn't RJ, old pal, how've you been? How's Mary?" I spun around. The man standing there was in his 40s, maybe a little older, tall, solid, with a close-cropped haircut and unnaturally white teeth. I had never seen him before, not once, and he had just asked about my girlfriend by name. That was the moment I snapped. "Can somebody please tell me what kind of joke this is?" I said, louder than I meant to, "because it's not funny anymore." The guy's smile fell apart instantly. He looked hurt, not embarrassed, not annoyed. Hurt, like I had insulted him deeply, but by then, I was too angry to care. "Look," I said, getting to my feet. "I'm happy to meet people. I'm new here. I get it. But I've been here for a few weeks, and all of you are acting like we're old friends when I don't even know your names yet. It's weird. It's seriously freaking me out." The whole room went quiet. People turned to stare at me like I had done something horrible. The man in front of me looked down, disappointed, then walked away without another word. After that, the office atmosphere changed completely. For about a week, nobody talked to me. No fake warmth, no strange greetings, nothing. It was like the entire office had agreed to pretend I did not exist. People in the cafeteria would leave space around me on purpose. Conversations would stop if I got too close. I could feel them avoiding me, except for Katie. She still kept finding me. It was almost like she knew exactly where I would be before I got there. I would be carrying my lunch to an empty table, and suddenly, she would appear with that same bright expression. "Oh, hi RJ. You're taking lunch now too? Mind if I join you?" I did mind. At least part of me did. The way she acted still made me uneasy. But another part of me was grateful she was the only one not treating me like a disease. And the more time we spent together, the stranger things got. Katie knew things about me that she should not have known. Not just simple things. Private things. She knew that I preferred Black Sabbath's Sabotage over Master of Reality. She knew my old college roommate Clark, and I used to argue about it for hours. She knew my brother had drifted across the country and was living in a squat somewhere. She knew my parents struggled to accept him for who he was. She knew about Mary, too. Not just her name, but details. Personal details. And somehow, talking to Katie never felt as wrong as it should have. It felt easy. Too easy. The only thing that bothered me was that I never learned much about her in return. Every time I tried to ask her something real, she slipped away from it. Once I asked what she had done before working at the company. She smiled in a strange way, tilted her head, and said, "Why would you want to know something like that?" I laughed it off, but it stayed with me. The rest of the office, meanwhile, got worse. The silence turned into something meaner. Not quite open bullying, but something close. Groups of employees would stand around the water cooler and just stare at me. Sometimes, someone would walk up, tap me on the shoulder, wait until I turned around, and then leave without saying a word. It started feeling like they were testing me, like they wanted to see how much I could take before I cracked again. Then, about 2 months into the job, I got called into my manager's office. Katie was the one who told me. This time she did not look cheerful. "I don't know what this is about," she said quietly. "It's probably nothing. But be careful, okay? He can be dangerous." I had only met my manager once during training, so that warning meant almost nothing to me. My day-to-day work went through my team lead, and to my surprise, that turned out to be the same man I had yelled at earlier. Martin, the one who had called me old pal and asked about Mary. Still, Katie's tone stayed with me as I walked to the office. The room was old-fashioned. Heavy desk, leather chairs, half-shut blinds, a few plants trying to make the place look softer. My manager sat behind the desk, in a slumped pose, like he had not moved in hours. He was a large, balding man, with a thick mustache and tired eyes. The second I stepped inside, He straightened up. "Ah, RJ," he said warmly. "Take a seat." I sat. He folded his hands and looked at me with what seemed like genuine concern. "RJ," he said, "I've been hearing from your colleagues that you haven't been feeling very well. Is that true?" The question made no sense. I had no idea what he meant. "Not really," I said carefully. "Honestly, I think I've been settling in pretty well." The moment I said settling in, something changed in his face. It was subtle, but I saw it. "Settling in?" he repeated. "Yeah," I said, getting used to things after onboarding." He gave a small laugh. "Don't you think you've been here long enough to move past that kind of humility?" I stared at him. "With respect," I began, but he cut me off. "Please, call me Reggie." It was the first time I had heard his name. I tried again. "Reggie, I've been working here for about 8 weeks, so—" He went cold, not offended like the others, not hurt. Cold. "RJ," he said, "you and I both know that isn't true. So why are you saying these things? Have you been talking to someone?" I honestly thought he might be insane. I tried to stay calm and told him the office culture was making me uncomfortable, that everyone seemed too familiar, too personal, too fast. He laughed. Actually laughed. Then he told me I had been working there for 24 years. 24 years. He said my work anniversary was coming up. I told him I was 24 years old. I told him he had read my resume, that he knew my age, that none of this made any sense. He did not care. He looked at me the way someone looks at a child throwing a tantrum. Then he told me he was waiting for an apology. I refused. He stared at me for a long moment, then told me to take the day off and rest. I left that office feeling like I had walked into someone else's nightmare. And when I got home, things became much worse. From the outside, my apartment looked the same. Same building, same worn hallway, same door. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was terribly wrong. I called out for Mary. No answer. That was strange already. She was supposed to be home. I checked my phone for a message, and my blood went cold. She was gone from my contacts list. Completely gone. In fact, the only contacts I could find were people from work. Martin, Katie, a few others. Then I looked around my apartment. It had changed. Not completely. The kitchen was still roughly the same shape, but all the warmth was gone. The paintings Mary and I had hung up were missing. The little signs of our life together had vanished. The living room was the worst part. It was almost empty. Bare walls, beige carpet, a desk with 2 monitors on it, a swivel chair, a desktop computer underneath. That was it. No couch, no bookshelves, no workout equipment, no yoga mats, no magazines, no signs that Mary or I had ever lived there at all. The desk looked exactly like the one I used at work. My bedroom was no better. Our bed was gone. The colorful frame Mary had painted was gone. In its place was a dirty mattress on the floor. I lost it. I started pacing, crying, shaking, checking every room like a desperate idiot, hoping reality would fix itself if I looked hard enough. But everywhere I turned, it was the same. My home had been erased and replaced with something sterile and miserable, like a life built only for work and sleep. I told myself it was a scare tactic, some sick thing the company was doing. Then I thought of Mary. Where was she? What had happened to her? I called her number from memory. She answered. I felt relief for 1 second. Then I said my name, and she had no idea who I was. At first I thought she was joking. Then I thought maybe the signal was bad. Then a man took the phone from her and warned me never to call her again. He called her his girl. When he hung up, I dropped the phone and screamed. Not cried, screamed. Whatever had happened, they had taken everything from me. That was when I decided I was done. I would quit. I would force them to process it. Then I would go to the police. I knew it sounded insane, but at that point, insanity was all I had left. The next morning, I came to work with a gun hidden inside my jacket. The second I walked in, I knew they knew. Everyone stopped and stared at me, not casually, not curiously. They looked at me all at once, wide-eyed and still, like security cameras tracking movement. The office was silent. I could feel them following me even when I did not hear footsteps. Katie was nowhere in sight. I changed my plan on the spot and went straight to Reggie's office. His secretary tried to stop me, but I pushed past her and went inside. He was there alone, sitting behind the desk, like always. I handed him my resignation letter. I quit, I said. He read it and told me it was not valid. At first, I thought he meant some technical issue. Then he said the notice period was 60 years. Not 60 days. 60 years. That was the moment something inside me broke. I pulled the gun and pointed it at him. I screamed at him to process my resignation immediately. He barely reacted. He just looked disgusted and told me I had no idea what this would cost me. Then, something happened I still cannot fully explain. The lights seemed to go out, but it felt deeper than that, like the whole room had fallen into another kind of darkness. I could not see anything. I could only feel him close to me, hear his voice whispering in my ear. He told me this was my last chance. He said, without him, I was nothing. He said if I got rid of him, I would perish. I told him to go to hell. Then, I squeezed the trigger. The lights came back. Reggie was dead in his chair. The police arrived almost immediately. I was caught with the gun still in my hand. The case was easy. My lawyer got me life in prison instead of the death penalty, mostly by arguing that I had been under the influence of something, even though no one could figure out exactly what. So that was it. Prison. Years of it. Too many to count in any meaningful way. At first, I still thought about the company, about Mary, about what they had done. Then prison life flattened time into something shapeless. You stop counting after a while, when you know there is no release waiting for you. Then one day I got a visitor, a woman with red hair in a bun, thick glasses, a familiar smile. Katie. She sat behind the glass and asked how I was holding up, like we were catching up over coffee. I wanted to hate her, but I was too tired. Then she said something that woke me up inside. She told me she was sorry. She told me what Reggie had done to me was wrong, and she told me she was trying to fix it. I had no idea what that meant. I told her I did not need her apology. She did not care. She just kept saying to trust her, that it would take time. Then she left. Months passed, maybe years. I do not know. Eventually I got sick. Really sick. Fever, coughing, blood, pain. My last clear memory of prison was seeing Reggie in some fever dream, leaning over me and saying, 60 years. 60 years. Then peace. When I woke up, I was standing in the hallway outside my old apartment. My real apartment. The one from before everything went wrong. The pictures were back on the walls. The smell of coffee came from the kitchen. The couch was there, the leather one Mary had picked because she joked it looked like the kind of thing people should make love on. Then she was there too. She ran at me, almost knocking me over, laughing and kissing me like nothing bad had ever happened. And I knew immediately that something was different. Not wrong exactly, just different. She looked like Mary. She sounded like Mary. She loved me like Mary. But the Mary I had known had bright blonde hair. This Mary was a brunette. A few days later, she handed me an envelope that had come in the mail. There was no name on the front. Inside was an impossible amount of cash and a platinum credit card in my name. On the back of the envelope was a note written in flowing handwriting. "Take this and get yourselves out of town, lovebirds. I'll always be there if you need help. Kay." Katie had kept her word. She had fixed things. Or at least, she had made a new version of them. So now I am here, alive, free, back with Mary even if she is not exactly the Mary I lost. And I know this is not the end, because if Katie gave me another chance, then I know Reggie must have gotten one too. I do not know who he is now. I do not know where he is. Maybe he will show up as a landlord, or a boss, or a neighbor, or someone smiling politely from across a desk. But I know he is out there, and I know he probably will not come for me first. He knows I am difficult. He knows my brother is not. My brother is alone, vulnerable, drifting through the world with nobody guarding him. So I am calling him today. I am going to make sure he is safe before Reggie finds him, because I have learned one thing from all of this. Some jobs do not end when you quit. Story 4. I arrived in Prague on a cold Tuesday afternoon, already feeling like I had picked the wrong time to visit. The weather was miserable, a mix of rain and biting wind, and the old town was crowded with tourists moving slowly through the streets. Everyone had their phones out, pointing them at towers and statues, stopping every few steps like they had all the time in the world. I didn't feel like being out there for long. After a quick dinner at a place that cost way more than it should have, I ducked into a small bar near the square. I don't remember the name, but I remember the feeling. Brick walls, worn wooden tables, and a narrow bar stacked with empty glasses. It felt older than everything outside, quieter, like it didn't care about tourists. I sat down and ordered a whiskey the bartender suggested, without much interest. It burned more than I expected, but I kept sipping it slowly, staring at my phone and pretending to answer messages I had already replied to earlier. That's when she sat down next to me. She didn't make it obvious. No greeting, no dramatic entrance. She just took the empty stool, leaned forward slightly, and ordered something in Czech. After a moment, she turned to me. "You're not from here," she said. I looked up. "Is it that obvious?" "A little." She smiled. There was something about her that stood out, but not in a loud way. She wasn't dressed up, no heavy makeup, nothing flashy, just a dark coat, a gray scarf, and her hair pulled back carelessly. Her eyes were very light, almost pale, and when she looked at me, she held it just a second longer than normal. "Where are you from?" she asked. "New York." She nodded slightly. "That explains how you say Prague." I laughed. "Fair enough." "I'm Daniel." She paused for a moment before answering. "Lenka." We kept talking. At first, it was just small things. Travel, the city, how long I was staying. I told her, only a few days. She seemed interested in that, like she was thinking about it more than necessary. We ordered more drinks. At some point, she took out a cigarette. As she rolled up her sleeve to light it, I noticed something on her wrist. A tattoo. It was small, but detailed. a circle made of thin lines crossing over each other in a way that felt deliberate. It reminded me of something old, like symbols you see in ancient books or diagrams. I must have stared too long. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It's interesting." She took a slow drag from her cigarette. "It's an old symbol," she said. "Something related to alchemy. What does it mean?" She shrugged slightly. "Old things always mean something. People just forget what." There was something about the way she said that, like she hadn't forgotten. We kept drinking. The bar got louder, more crowded, but it felt like everything else faded a little, like the conversation was happening in its own space. Then she said, out of nowhere, "There's a tattoo place nearby. It's open late." I thought she was joking. "You want me to get a tattoo right now?" "I don't think that's a good idea," after a few drinks. She looked at me for a few seconds. Sometimes important decisions happen like that. I don't know why I agreed. Even now, I can't explain it properly. It didn't feel like pressure. It felt like something I had already decided without realizing it. We left the bar and walked through the narrow streets. The rain had stopped, but everything was wet, reflecting the yellow streetlights on the cobblestones. The city felt quieter, like it had shifted into something else. The tattoo studio was small, tucked away on a side street. A red light above the door flickered slightly. Inside, it smelled like antiseptic and ink. The artist barely spoke. Lenka pointed to her wrist and said something to him in Czech. He nodded and got everything ready. I sat down. The machine buzzed. "It's small," she said. "Just the symbol. The same one you have?" "The same one." The needle stung, sharp and steady. I watched as the design slowly appeared on my skin. When it was done, the artist wiped it clean and stepped back. I looked at it. It was exactly like hers. "Now you're part of it," she said. I looked at her. Part of what? She didn't answer. After that, things start to blur. I remember walking. The Charles Bridge, statues lined up in the dark, the river moving quietly below. Then pieces of memory that don't fit together properly. A heavy door. Candles. Her voice close to my ear, saying something I couldn't understand. Then I remember cold. I was standing somewhere high, near a narrow stone window. Wind was coming in from outside, sharp and freezing. It took me a few seconds to realize where I was. One of the towers. I looked down at my hands. I was holding a knife. There was blood on it. There was blood on my fingers, too, dried under my nails. I tried to remember how I got there. The bar. The tattoo. Then more. A room underground. Stone walls. A table in the center. Candles everywhere. And a body. A woman lying on the stone, her throat cut open, blood pooling, flowing into a carved channel, dripping into something below. There were people around her, wearing black robes, their faces hidden. They were chanting. The air was thick, heavy with smoke and something burning. I couldn't breathe properly. Somewhere, an organ started playing, deep and slow, making everything feel like it was vibrating. I tried to move. I couldn't. Then I felt her hand on my arm. "Look," she whispered. The chanting stopped. The music stopped. Everyone lifted their heads at the same time, and they were all looking at me. I woke up suddenly. I was back in my hotel room. Morning light was coming through the window. The sound of a tram in the distance felt normal, grounding. I turned my head. Lenka was lying next to me, asleep, peaceful, like nothing had happened. I told myself it was just a nightmare. The whiskey, the stress, the unfamiliar place. It all made sense if I didn't think too much about it. We met again that day, walked around the city, went to another bar, drank more than we should have. Everything felt normal again. Too normal. Later, I told her about the dream. She smiled slightly. Maybe it was the whiskey. Some of them are strong. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I was inside the circle, wearing the robe, saying the words. I stepped forward. The woman was alive, tied up. When she looked at me, I knew what I was supposed to do. I had the knife. I woke up shaking. The third night was worse. There was no buildup, no confusion, just the aftermath. The woman was already dead. The knife was in my hand. Blood everywhere. I ran, up the stairs, through a door. Cold air hit me. Then, sirens. Police below. People gathering. I looked at my hands again, still holding the knife. And then I remembered something clearly. Everyone had been watching me, waiting, like I was supposed to do it. I woke up again, back in my hotel room, but this time something was different. I could still feel it, the weight of the knife, the warmth of the blood. I went to the bathroom and washed my hands over and over, but it didn't feel like enough. Then I noticed something, the tattoo. It was burning. The skin was red, irritated, hotter than it should have been. I ran cold water over it, but the heat didn't go away. That's when I saw it. The knife, leaning against the wall near the curtain, exactly like I remembered it. I froze. I knew I had dropped it. I was sure of it. But it was here, in my room. I stepped back slowly and opened the closet. Inside, hanging next to my coat, was a black robe, the same kind I had seen in the dream. I didn't touch it. I closed the door carefully. Now I'm sitting here, trying to make sense of everything. I don't know if those were dreams. I don't know if I actually went to that place. I don't know what's going to happen tonight. But I know one thing. That tattoo wasn't just a tattoo. And whatever I became part of, it hasn't let me go. Story 5. The dog dies at the end of this story. I still hate calling it a dog, but that's what it was. A dog. A good boy. I found him one afternoon behind a dumpster while I was digging for food. I hadn't noticed the box at first, but when I climbed out with whatever I could salvage, I heard a soft little yip near my feet. I looked down, and there he was, tail wagging like crazy, tongue hanging out, panting happily like he had just been waiting for me. He wasn't even really a puppy, more like a young mutt, already big enough to press his head against my hand like he knew me, like we'd always belonged to each other. I shouldn't have taken him. I could barely take care of myself. My place was a mess, my life was worse, and I didn't have money for a dog. But none of that mattered. He followed me home like he had already decided. No hesitation, no fear. Just that same wagging tail, like he'd finally found where he was meant to be. The second I opened my apartment door, he ran inside like he owned it, started sniffing around, making these soft, strange huffing sounds. Not quite panting, more like snickering. I told myself it was just how he breathed. The place was awful. Trash everywhere. Takeout boxes, empty cans, bottles, paper bowls. I kicked some of it aside just to make space to walk. He didn't care. He jumped straight onto the couch and curled up like he had always lived there. I remember laughing under my breath. "Good boy," I said. His tail went wild. And that's the part that still gets to me. Because whatever he was a good boy. At least, that's how it made me feel. He woke me up every morning, way earlier than I was used to, licking my face, his breath disgusting, his tongue pushing against my mouth, until I couldn't ignore him anymore. I'd drag myself outside, sit on the steps with a terrible cup of coffee, and watch him sniff around the little patch of grass like it was the greatest place in the world. No matter how bad everything else was, he always seemed happy, like everything belonged to him. At first, nothing felt wrong. He moved like a normal dog, acted like one too, mostly. The first real problem happened when I brought a girl over. She didn't mind the mess. She actually liked the dog. She walked up to him, smiling, reaching down to pet him, and then his mouth changed. I don't even know how to explain it properly. It didn't open like a normal dog's mouth. It split. Wrong. Not sideways like it should, but in a way that didn't make sense. Before I could react, he bit her, took 2 of her fingers clean off. I rushed her to the hospital. She never spoke to me again. After that, things started getting worse. I came home one night and found he had torn open a bag of dog food I had grabbed earlier. Food everywhere. I was too tired to deal with it, so I shoved what was left into the fridge and went to bed. That night, I felt him nudge my hand, whimpering. I barely woke up. "Go back to bed," I mumbled, pushing him away. The next day, he seemed normal again, maybe a little sad. I took him for a walk, but he barked at everyone. Loud, non-stop. It got too much, so I dragged him back home and tried to ignore it. That night, I woke up to noise in the kitchen. I thought he was getting into the fridge again. When I walked in, I saw him, standing on 2 legs, hunched over, the fridge open, light spilling out across the floor. He was shoving food into his mouth, but the way he moved, the way his body bent, it wasn't right. It hurt to look at him, like staring at something your brain refuses to understand. I screamed. He stopped and turned his head toward me slowly, and then I heard it. "Go back to bed." The voice wasn't coming from his mouth, but it was him. I don't know how I knew that. I just did. I went back to my room. I didn't fight it. I told myself it was a dream. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. He licked my face, like always. I went to apologize to my neighbor for the noise, but he said he hadn't heard anything. No one had. That made it worse. I started looking things up. Possession. Something. Anything. Nothing helped. The dog didn't react to anything I tried. Holy water, crosses, nothing mattered to him. He just watched me. From corners, from under the bed. Those eyes weren't a dog's eyes. I knew I had to do something. So I waited. One afternoon, he fell asleep on the couch. I took a knife from the kitchen. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself I wasn't about to do something horrible. My hand kept shaking. Every part of me wanted to drop the knife and just pet him, tell him he was a good boy again. But I knew that's what it wanted. I couldn't let it win. So I stabbed him, right between the shoulders. He didn't react at first, just kept breathing like he was still asleep. Then his eyes opened. I let go of the knife and stumbled back. He stood up slowly, turned his head all the way around to look at the knife in his back. His bones made these awful popping sounds as he twisted. Then he pulled the knife out, like it was nothing. I kicked it away. He stretched. His body shifted, stretched too far, then snapped back into place. Then he walked up to me, licked my face. His tongue brushed against my ear. Then he walked to the door, stood up again, unlocked it, opened it. He looked back at me from the hallway, and then he said it, "Bad boy." And he left. The next morning, my neighbor told me my dog had been hit by a car. He said it was a terrible sight. I ran outside. There was only blood. No body. That was weeks ago. Sometimes, at night, I still hear barking. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my things and decided to leave. Stay with a friend. Get out of that place for good. While I was moving my stuff, my neighbor stopped me in the hallway. He was holding a small dog. Said he found it behind the building. Felt bad for it. It must have been in a fight, he said, petting it gently. Its left ear's gone, and there's this deep cut on its back. I looked at the dog. It looked up at me. Its tail started wagging, like it knew me, like it had been waiting. Story 6. Isolation changes people. For some, it breaks them. For others, it makes them stronger. For me, it did something else entirely. It hollowed me out and left me in a place where being alone stopped feeling like a condition and started feeling like a rule. Some people cannot handle loneliness. They need noise, conversation, movement, the comfort of knowing another person is nearby. Others can survive it well enough. They read, they hike, they fish, they find small ways to fill the silence. I never really got to choose which kind of person I wanted to be. Ever since I took the job as a fire watch, I have been alone in the truest sense of the word. Not just living alone, not just sleeping alone. I mean, alone in a tower, alone in the woods, alone with the sky and the trees, and my own thoughts for company. The reason I took the job was simple, even if the truth behind it is ugly. Life kept stripping people away from me, until being alone stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like fate. When I was 19, my mother died from a sudden heart attack. A couple of years later, my father followed her, taken by a virus and heart failure working together. Then, about a year ago, I was in a head-on collision with a drunk driver. My wife Claire was in the car. My son Jack was too. They did not survive it. I did. After that, it felt like the universe had made its decision about me. I was meant to be left behind. I was meant to be alone. Back in the day, I used to play this indie game called Firewatch. If you know it, then you know the feeling it carries. Loneliness, guilt, escape, and all those quiet miles of wilderness in between. That game stayed with me for years. After Claire and Jack were gone, something in me decided that hiding away in a fire tower sounded less like a fantasy and more like the only life that still made sense. So I took the job. Most of my days followed the same pattern. I woke with the sunrise because the tower had windows on every side, and once the light came up, there was no ignoring it. I would make something small to eat, usually toast with butter, then turn the radio on to hear distant voices talk about a world that no longer felt like mine. After that, I would grab my binoculars and make a slow turn, scanning the trees in every direction for any sign of smoke. If I spotted some, I would radio my boss, Cam, and ask whether there was a sanctioned camper in that area. If there was, I left it alone unless the smoke started looking too thick. If not, I went to check it myself. Usually it was just teenagers sneaking out into the woods to drink. I would give them a speech about fire safety, tell them to get proper approval next time, and make them put out their campfire the right way. Drown the coals in water. Then lay sticks across the pit in an X so anyone passing by knew it was dead. It was simple, but you would be amazed how many people forgot one step, or both. There were also the people I called the crazies, the Bigfoot hunters mostly. They liked calling themselves squatchers, and they swore this part of the Upper Peninsula was packed with sightings. They were loud, dramatic, and impossible to argue with, but mostly harmless. The ones I disliked more were the missing 411 types. They were convinced every missing hiker was part of some huge cover-up and that I was somehow in on it. Those people could get aggressive in a hurry. Still, the work was usually easy. Morning scans, a walk around the trails at lunch with a sandwich, back to the tower, more scanning, reading, then sleep. That was my life, and for a while, it almost felt peaceful. I was stationed in one of the national parks in the UP. I got there in mid-May to prepare for fire season. Wildfires were not common there, but the last few years had been unusually dry, so the Forest Service was taking no chances. Most of May passed, without much happening. A couple of campfires to put out, a few drunk teenagers, some men in the woods making fake Bigfoot calls at night and scaring other campers. Nothing serious. Then June came, and everything changed. It started with a dream. In the dream, I was standing in a wide meadow. No matter where I looked, there was nothing but open field. It was beautiful in the wrong way, too calm, too endless, like a trap dressed up as peace. I started running, trying to find a way out, but the field never ended. Then, I felt a deep vibration moving through the ground. Not a sound exactly, more like a pressure in my bones. The earth beneath me began to shake and ripple. Hot coals appeared around my feet, piling up against my ankles. The grass was vanishing under them. I tried to run harder, but something was buried deep where my neck met my skull. When I reached back, I found a hook. My head was hanging from it like meat. Below me was a pile of bones. Some were white and clean. Others still had hair and pieces of skin clinging to them. I could not move. I could only watch. A huge figure stepped toward me out of the distance. I could not see it clearly, but it carried a stone knife. The dread I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever known. The bones below me caught fire. Their ash blew away. Suddenly the meadow was burned black, and in the middle of all that scorched land stood a single boulder. Beneath its edge was a crack in the earth, a dark opening that went down farther than I could see. There were giant bare footprints leading to it, larger than any human prints I had ever seen. Then I heard screams. Some begged for help. Others sounded like war cries. A sharp screech tore through everything, and my vision went black. I woke to the radio screaming. Cam was shouting through static, telling me there was a fire a mile away and that a water scooper plane was already on scene. Even though they thought they had it under control, she told me to get clear fast. Half asleep and shaking, I grabbed what I needed and made my way to a nearby lake. I untied the little flat-bottom boat, rowed out toward the middle, and dropped anchor. Only after I stopped moving did I look back toward shore. For a moment, I thought I saw someone running deeper into the tree line. 6 hours later, the fire was finally out. The silence after the crackling flames and the engines overhead felt worse than the noise. When I rowed back in, I checked the stretch of shore where I thought I had seen someone. All I found was a cleaned fish and a bare human footprint. I stood there in the damp morning air and said out loud, "Must have spooked a night fisherman or something." I think I only said it because the silence felt too heavy otherwise. Back in the tower, I radioed Cam and asked if she wanted me to inspect the burn area. She told me to rest and check it in the morning. I tried to sleep, but one thought would not leave me. Had I dreamed about the fire before it happened? The next morning was gray and steaming from all the water they had dumped on the forest. Fog clung low to the ground, wrapping around the tree trunks like a blanket. I went through my normal routine, then hiked out to the burn site. It was bad. A huge patch of land had been burned clean, something like 864,000 square feet. Trees, grass, underbrush, all of it gone. The Forest Service later said they would let nature heal it on its own. No replanting, no intervention, unless they had to. They also could not figure out what had caused the fire. There had been no campers in that area, no lightning, nothing simple to blame. After the officials left, I stayed behind. That was when I noticed the boulder, the same boulder from my dream. And under its lip, now exposed by the fire, was the crack in the ground. I checked my map to see if it had ever been marked. It had not. I pulled out my flashlight and shone it inside, expecting maybe to find a den or some trapped animal. Instead, I found bones, a lot of them, at least 15 skeletons, maybe more, lying in a heap in various stages of decay. Every bone I could see had small hack marks on it, like someone had chopped at them again and again with a dull blade. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight, then ran all the way back to the tower and radioed Cam. I shouted for her until she finally answered, annoyed because she was in the middle of debriefing with firefighters. I told her she needed to come out there, that I had found something terrible. She did not show up until the next morning. By then, she was tired, irritated, and clearly expecting me to have wasted her time. On the hike out, I told her everything. I described the skeletons, the marks on the bones, the number of them, and how strange it was that it roughly matched the number of missing hikers from recent years, plus the sudden resignations of previous fire watchmen. When we reached the boulder, the grave was gone. Just gone. No skeletons, no pile of bones, nothing except the boulder and the crack. I stared at it in disbelief. This can't be possible, I said. It was here yesterday. Cam looked at me like I had finally lost my mind. She refused to help me dig. She told me I had dragged her through ash and forest just to show her a stupid rock. Then she accused me of not being able to handle the isolation. And then she left. I stayed behind, furious and desperate, digging at the dirt like a madman until my hands hurt. But there was nothing, no bones, no grave, just the boulder and a hole I had made myself. By the time I got back to the tower, the whole day was gone. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I was not myself. I knew somehow that I was a woman named Aubrey Ford, one of the hikers who had gone missing the year before. I was lost in the woods at night, trying to read a map by moonlight because my flashlight was dead and my phone had no charge left. My spare batteries and power bank were missing from my pack. I was crying, panicking, begging God to let me figure out where I was. Then I heard a snap in the trees to my right. I called out, hoping it was a ranger. Instead, a hand closed around my throat. I tried to scream, but only a choked whimper came out. Lightning flashed, and I woke. Rain was falling through the leaking skylight above my bed, soaking me. A storm had blown in overnight. Thunder rolled around the tower, and lightning lit up the windows again and again. When I tried the radio, all I got was static and horrible shrieking feedback. Then, With each flash of lightning, I saw faces at the windows. Gray faces, thin faces, sunken faces. They were speaking, but I could not understand them at first. Then I realized they were not angry the way I had first assumed. They were terrified, pleading. One of them was Aubrey, pounding on the glass. "They're coming for you," she screamed in a voice that sounded like wind through trees. "Stop them, so we may finally rest." The radio crackled with more voices, whispering, "Run, hide, save yourself." Then I turned toward the tower door and saw another face I recognized from old files and stories. Easton, the fire watcher who had worked there before me. "You cannot rest," he said. "Stop them so we may rest." I demanded he explain, but all he did was repeat himself, then ask, "Do you still not understand?" The next flash of lightning came, and all the faces were gone. But for the briefest second I saw someone outside the tower, standing on the balcony. The moment they saw me, they jumped the railing and vanished into the night. After that storm, something changed in me. The crack under the boulder started pulling at my mind. For 7 weeks, I resisted it. Every day I thought about it. Every day I refused to go back. Until last night. Last night, I dreamed of Claire. She was walking ahead of me through the woods in a pale nightgown, her auburn brown hair flowing down her back. She was carrying something in her arms, and when she turned, I saw it was Jack. She smiled sadly and whispered for me to follow. Whenever she disappeared around a bend, I would find her again farther ahead, waiting. She led me to the boulder and the crack. Then she turned to me fully. It was Claire, exactly as I remembered her, beautiful and gentle, and gone. "You're not safe here," she whispered. "You mustn't follow their tracks." I tried to run to her, to hold her and Jack, but I woke before I reached them. Only I was not in bed. I was standing at the boulder in nothing but my t-shirt and gym shorts. The crack was open again, and orange light was glowing from inside. I should have run. Instead, I crawled in. Inside, the first chamber looked like a cathedral made by the earth itself. Huge stone formations rose all around me. Voices whispered from the dark, "Help us." Then the cave narrowed into something more like an old mine tunnel. Getting hotter the deeper I went. I stumbled over loose shapes and shone my light down. Bones, old bones. Beside them were unused sticks of dynamite and ancient fire-starting tools. Covered in dust, Easton and Aubrey appeared again in my mind, their voices joining. "We cannot rest. You cannot rest. Stop them before they kill the rest." I kept going. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a second chamber, even larger than the first. Crystals glowed. Cave paintings covered the walls, from ancient animals to more modern ones. The air stank of something musky and rotten and deeply familiar. Then I saw them. At first I thought they were animals. Then I realized they were people, or close enough to people to make it worse. Tall, broad, and hairy all over except for parts of their faces and chests. Men and women both, pale-faced and bearded, moving around a huge fire with terrifying grace. They ate while they danced. Human meat, animal meat. Bodies hung nearby on hooks, stripped in places, the missing 411 people, and the squatchers who had wandered too close. At the center sat an old one on a throne of stone, gray-haired and heavy with age. He raised a hand and the others went silent while he spoke in a language I did not understand. But I understood enough. The paintings behind him showed their people worshiping fire, feeding it offerings. They had caused the wildfire, and they had been doing this for a long time. Then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. Easton stood behind me, silent but clear. I knew then what I had to do. I backed away as slowly as I could, keeping my eyes on them. But one loose bone betrayed me. It clattered across the stone, and the old one looked straight at me. Then all of them moved. I ran. I threw myself back through the tunnels, scraping my knees, my hands, my feet. They were bigger, stronger, but in that narrow space, my smaller frame gave me an advantage. By the time I reached the chamber with the dynamite, I knew I could not outrun them all the way back to the surface. So I made a choice. I grabbed as many old sticks of dynamite as I could carry and piled them near the narrowest passage. I found the best fuse I could, hid behind a stone, and started striking an old flint and iron together. Again and again. Nothing. Behind me, their roars were getting closer. I struck harder. Still nothing. Then, just when I thought I was out of time, one spark flew off, landed on the fuse, and caught. That is the last clear thing I remember. Apparently, they found me 18 hours later, half crushed under cave rubble after the collapse. The last image I carry from inside that place is of a large man in a mask, pulling rock off my chest and dragging me out. I also remember, with impossible clarity, the faces of Easton, Aubrey, and all the others smiling down at me as I was dragged across the grass. The rescue team put an oxygen mask over my face and tried asking me questions, but the blast had destroyed my hearing. Their mouths moved, but I heard nothing. Then I saw Cam. She was standing with them, dressed in whatever she had thrown on in a hurry, pointing toward the cave entrance and talking fast. And as I watched her, dazed and broken and barely alive, one thought rose through all the pain and confusion. Had she always been that hairy? Story 7. For the last 3 weeks, something has been following me home at night, and last night I finally caught it. The problem is that I do not think I caught the thing I was supposed to catch. I have been sitting in my apartment ever since, too tired to leave and too scared to sleep. My hands are still shaking as I write this, and every few minutes I hear footsteps outside on the sidewalk, slow and uneven, moving back and forth in front of my building. I keep telling myself that if I write everything down clearly, maybe I will stop feeling like I am losing my mind. Maybe if I see the story laid out in front of me, I will be able to tell myself there is a logical explanation. But deep down, I already know there is not. Something is out there. Something was out there before I ever understood what was happening. And now, it knows where I live. My shift ends at 11:30 every night. I work late at a small shipping warehouse on the edge of town, and by the time I clock out, everything already feels half asleep. I take the last bus home and get off near Oak Ridge Drive around 11:45. From there, it is about a 15-minute walk to my apartment. During the day, the neighborhood looks normal. It is quiet, older, a little run down in places, but not bad. The houses sit close together, with small front lawns, narrow sidewalks, and huge trees that hang over the street like dark umbrellas. In daylight, it feels safe enough, but late at night, the whole place changes. The houses go dark one by one. Porch lights glow in yellow pools. Sometimes a television flickers through a front window. The streetlights hum softly overhead. And if the wind is moving, the branches above you whisper and scrape in a way that makes every empty street feel watched. The first night I heard the footsteps behind me, I barely thought about it. I had my headphones hanging around my neck, but I was not listening to anything. I liked the quiet after work. My feet were crunching over little bits of grit and gravel on the sidewalk, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, and then stopped. Then I heard another set of footsteps behind mine. At first it sounded completely normal, like somebody else was walking home the same way I was. The steps were steady, maybe 20 feet behind me. I did not speed up. I did not get nervous. I just assumed there was another late-night worker heading in the same direction. Then I stopped for a second to look at my phone, and the footsteps stopped too. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I turned around immediately, expecting to see someone freeze, or maybe look embarrassed at being noticed. But the street behind me was empty. There were parked cars along the curb, a trash bin tipped over near a driveway, and a streetlight overhead buzzing and flickering like it was about to die. The shadows from the trees stretched across the pavement in long black shapes, but there was no person there, no one standing still, no one walking away, nothing. I stood and listened for a few seconds, but I heard no breathing, no doors opening, no voice, no sound at all. Eventually, I shrugged it off and kept walking. 10 seconds later, I heard the footsteps again behind me. I spun around faster that time. The street was still empty. The second night, it happened again in almost the exact same place. Same road, same distance behind me. Same strange pattern where the footsteps matched me until I stopped, then froze the second I froze. I turned around twice that night, and both times there was nobody there. After that, I stopped calling it a coincidence. By the fourth or fifth night, it had started getting under my skin. It is hard to explain, but there is a kind of fear your body recognizes before your mind does. A feeling that you are being watched, that you are being followed, that something is behind you, and you are supposed to keep moving, not because you are calm, but because some deeper part of you knows that turning around will not help. That is what the walk home became. Every night, I would get off the bus, adjust my bag on my shoulder, and start down Oak Ridge, knowing that at some point I would hear it. My own footsteps on the sidewalk, then the softer ones behind me, always the same distance back, never closer, never farther away, just there. It got to the point where I started changing my route home. Sometimes I crossed the street twice for no reason. Sometimes I added an extra block just to see if it would keep following me. Sometimes I walked faster, and sometimes I slowed down. It never mattered. The footsteps would begin somewhere around the halfway point, and then continue at exactly the same distance, as if whatever was making them already knew my pace before I chose it. One night, a car passed me, and the headlights swept across the sidewalk and the parked cars and the low fences in front of the houses. I looked back so quickly that it hurt my neck because I was sure I would finally see something in the light. But there was nobody, only tree shadows moving across the road. Another night, I got desperate enough to try hiding. I stopped walking all at once and slipped behind a parked SUV, crouching beside the back tire so that if anybody was trailing me, they would have to walk right past. I stayed there for almost a full minute, barely breathing, listening so carefully that my ears started to ring with the effort. Nothing passed. Me, no footsteps, no movement, no human shape crossing the street. Finally, I stood up and stepped back onto the sidewalk. 2 seconds later, the footsteps started again behind me, like they had been there the whole time, patiently waiting for me to resume. That was the night I stopped telling myself it was probably nothing. After that, the fear started affecting everything. At work, I found myself watching the clock too much, dreading the bus ride, dreading the walk from the stop to my apartment. I started leaving one headphone in and one out, because I was scared of not hearing it start. I began checking over my shoulder every few seconds, even before the footsteps came. The worst part was that I never saw anyone. If it had been a person, a real stalker, at least that would have given me something solid to deal with. I could have gone to the police, or tried to get a description, or told somebody what was happening without sounding insane. But how do you explain to someone that every night you hear a person behind you who vanishes every time you turn around? How do you explain that some part of you knows those footsteps are aimed specifically at you? By last night, I was done being scared. Or maybe I was just tired of feeling helpless. I told myself that whatever this was, I was going to force it into the open. There is a stretch of oak ridge where the sidewalk narrows and dips between two giant hedges. They are taller than I am, and so thick you cannot see through them even in daylight. At night, that section of the street is darker than the rest, because the street light there has been broken for months. The whole area feels sealed off from the neighborhood around it. If someone were going to hide somewhere nearby, that is where they would do it. So when I got off the bus last night and started the walk home, I already knew what I was going to do. I kept my pace normal and tried to act casual, even though my heart was pounding so hard it felt like another pair of footsteps under my skin. The neighborhood was quiet in the usual way. A wind moved through the leaves overhead. Somewhere down the block, a screen door slammed shut. My shoes clicked against the pavement, and then, right on schedule, I heard the second set of footsteps begin behind me. Same pace, same distance, same awful certainty. I kept walking until I reached the hedge-lined part of the street. The dark there felt thicker than usual, like it had weight. I was right beside the hedge when I spun around and sprinted directly back toward the sound. I did not give myself time to think. I just ran. For the first time in 3 weeks, I hit something solid. A body slammed into mine, hard enough to knock the breath out of me. We both went down on the sidewalk in a tangle of arms and legs. I remember the shock of impact, my shoulder hitting concrete, the rough scrape of pavement on my hands. I reacted without thinking and grabbed a fistful of jacket before whoever it was could scramble away. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted. The person under me was breathing hard, almost gasping. "Jesus," he said, "you weren't supposed to catch me." I started to snap back at him, ready to call him a stalker, a creep, anything, but the words died the second I got a proper look at his face. It was mine. Not similar, not close enough to be unsettling. Mine, same eyes, same nose, same haircut, same shape of jaw. He was wearing the same jacket I was wearing. Even his expression, before panic took over, felt like something I had seen in the mirror 100 times. The only difference was that he looked worse. His skin was pale. Dark circles sat under his eyes like bruises. His lip was split. There was dirt ground into his sleeves, and he looked like someone who had not slept properly in days. For a few seconds we just stared at each other in silence. I do not know how long it actually lasted. It felt like time had split open. My mind kept reaching for explanations and rejecting all of them before they could fully form. Twin brother? No. Hallucination? No. Trick? No. Nothing fit. Somehow, I found my voice first. "Why are you following me?" I asked. His eyes flicked past me, looking over my shoulder down the street. The change in his face was immediate and terrifying. Every trace of irritation or confusion vanished and was replaced by pure panic. "I'm not following you," he said quietly. "I'm making sure you stay ahead of it." The cold feeling that ran through me then was worse than anything I had felt during the last 3 weeks combined. My stomach dropped, like I had missed a step at the top of the stairs. Ahead of what? I asked. He did not answer. He pushed himself halfway upright, still staring over my shoulder. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "You caught the wrong person." And then I heard it. Footsteps. But not like before. Not one pair. Not even two. This was something else entirely. Too many impacts, striking the pavement too close together, too fast, and with no normal rhythm to them. It sounded wrong in a way I felt in my chest. Like several people trying to move as one body and failing to agree on the timing. Step, 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 step. I do not know how else to describe it. It was like something had studied how humans walk and learned the sound, but not the rhythm. The other me grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "I've been buying you time for 3 weeks," he said. Then he hauled me up to my feet and shouted, "Run." We both turned toward the darker end of the street. I started running without looking back, but just before I did, I heard something behind us trying to speak. That is the only way I can put it. The sound was almost a voice, but stretched and broken, as if words were being pushed through the wrong shape of mouth. My other self ran in the opposite direction. 1 second he was next to me, dragging me forward, and the next he broke away and bolted down the block the way we had come. I do not know whether he did it to distract the thing or because he knew it could not follow both of us. I only know I have not seen him since. I ran all the way home. I do not remember unlocking the building door. I do not remember climbing the stairs. I only remember the sound of my own breathing and the certainty that if I looked behind me, I would see something that would finish breaking whatever part of my mind was still functioning. Somehow I got inside my apartment, locked the door, and pressed my whole body against it. I stayed there for a long time, listening. At first, there was nothing. Then, after a few minutes, the footsteps started outside. Not on the stairs, not in the hall, on the sidewalk outside the building. Slow, uneven, back and forth, step, 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 like something pacing and trying to decide whether it has permission to come closer. That was hours ago, and it has not really stopped. Every now and then it fades for a little while, and I tell myself maybe it has gone. Then it starts again, always outside, always the same broken rhythm. I keep replaying everything in my head and trying to understand one thing more than anything else. What did he mean when he said he had been buying me time? How do you buy time from something like that? Was he out there every night, making sure it stayed a certain distance behind me? Was it following him too? Is he me from some other point in time? Some future version that already knows what happens when it catches up? I do not know. I do not know any of it. All I know is that for 3 weeks, I thought I was being followed by one thing, and when I finally turned to confront it, I found out there were two. One of them looked exactly like me. The other one is still outside. I made the mistake of looking through the blinds once, maybe 20 minutes ago. I only moved them a fraction of an inch. I did not see a body. I did not see a face. I just saw movement in the dark near the curb, low and shifting, like more than one shadow trying to hold itself together under the streetlight. Then the steps stopped, and for a second, I heard that almost voice again. It sounded like it was trying to say my name. I do not know if I should leave. I do not know if staying here is worse. I do not know if my other self is still alive somewhere down the street, or if he knew all along that only one of us was supposed to make it back here tonight. But I do know this. If you ever hear footsteps behind you that stop exactly when you stop, do not assume turning around will help. And if you finally catch the thing that has been following you, pray that it is the one you meant to catch. Because if it is not, then whatever is really behind you has already had plenty of time to get closer. Story 8. It was a cold, rainy night in April, when everything started. Me and my friend Bailey were sitting together talking about random stuff like we usually did, when I came across one of those creepy internet myths. "Hey, Bailey, look at this," I said, showing her my phone. She looked at me with a confused expression. "Yeah? What is it? Have you ever heard of the elevator game?" I asked. Her face immediately changed. "No? Why?" I stared at her, trying to sound serious. "It's this thing online. You go to a random hotel at exactly 3 a.m. Then you press all the elevator buttons, close your eyes, and say a name 3 times. She frowned. "What name?" I leaned in slightly. "Isadora." Before I could continue, she jumped back, clearly upset. "Dude, that's not funny," she said, her voice sharp. "You know I hate this kind of stuff. I don't mess with paranormal things." She paused, then added more quietly, "And you shouldn't either. Stuff like that, it comes back to you." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, come on. That's just something people say. It's probably fake. We should try it tomorrow." Her expression hardened. "No, I'm not going with you. Stop trying to drag me into this." I sighed dramatically. "Fine, you don't have to come in. Just wait near the stairs or something." She shook her head. "I'm tired. Can we just drop this and go to sleep?" But I couldn't drop it. The next morning, I was already planning everything. I mapped out where we'd meet, which hotel we'd go to, everything step by step. I called her and showed her the plan. "Look," I said, trying to convince her. "I've got everything figured out. Nothing's going to happen. Just come with me. You don't even have to do anything." She stared at me through the screen, clearly annoyed. "Fine," she said finally, "but this is the last time." "Got it?" "Deal," I said quickly. We agreed to meet later that night in a parking lot near a random hotel. Hours passed. By the time it was almost 3 a.m., Bailey still wasn't there. She was 6 minutes late, and I was starting to think about just canceling the whole thing. Then my phone rang. "Hey, I see you," she said. "I'm walking over. Just stay on the line, okay? I don't want anything weird happening." I laughed lightly. "Relax. I'm right here." In the distance, a church bell rang. 3 times. That was our signal. We walked into the hotel together. The place was quiet, almost empty, with dim lights and a faint smell of cleaning chemicals. I stopped in front of the elevator and turned to Bailey. "Look, if anything happens, I'll be right there with you," I said. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. We stepped inside. The moment the doors started closing, I pressed every button I could reach. One by one, they all lit up. My heart started beating faster, even though I kept telling myself it was just a dumb story. "Just a myth," I whispered under my breath. I leaned back against the wall, waiting. The elevator moved. It stopped on a floor. The doors opened. No one was there. The doors closed again. Floor after floor. Open, empty hallway. Close. Then, finally, it stopped again. The doors opened slowly, and that's when everything changed. A woman stepped inside. She was tall. Her long hair covered her face completely, hanging wet and heavy. Her dress was soaked, clinging to her body like she had just come out of water. Dark bruises covered her arms and legs. The air in the elevator suddenly felt cold. Too cold. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think properly. She stood there silently for a second. Then she started crying. Not normal crying. It sounded wrong. Deep, uneven, like something breaking inside her. I closed my eyes immediately, just like the instructions said. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. What did I do? I thought, why did I bring Bailey here? The crying turned into something else. She started singing, a soft, broken version of a children's nursery rhyme. I couldn't understand the words fully, but I knew it wasn't right. Something about it felt twisted, like it didn't belong in this world. I opened my eyes for just a second. She was looking directly at me. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew she was staring. Then her mouth opened, and her teeth. They fell out, one by one, dropping to the floor with small, hollow sounds. I froze completely. Behind me, Bailey screamed. It was loud, sharp, and full of pure panic. Everything went dark for a second. When I looked around again, the elevator was empty. No woman, no Bailey, nothing. I was alone. My vision started to blur. My head felt light, like I was about to pass out. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. Then I felt it, a hand, resting on my shoulder, cold, heavy, and right next to my ear, I heard a voice, soft, close. To the person reading this, I know who you are. Story 9. Memory is a strange thing. It does not keep everything the way it happened. It saves certain moments, hides others, and sometimes changes the shape of old memories until you can no longer tell what was real and what your mind added later. If I am being honest, I do not remember much of my childhood clearly. There are large parts of it that feel blurred, like trying to look through fogged glass. Sometimes I see flashes of rooms, certain faces, or the sound of someone speaking from another part of the house. But most of it is not solid. It is as if my life only truly began once I was old enough to notice that I existed inside it. Before that, old photographs do most of the remembering for me. Even now, I cannot say exactly when I first became aware of the world around me in a real way. I mean that moment when you stop simply living and start storing memories for yourself. That point where your own mind becomes a place where events can stay, instead of only being things other people tell you happened. I do not know when that started for me, but I do know that from a very young age, there was one thing about me that never changed. I was always a dreamer, not in the hopeful, ambitious sense. I was not the kind of child who spoke about becoming rich or famous or changing the world. What I mean is that sleep and dreams always felt unusually close to me. Even when I was very young, I could remember my dreams in incredible detail. Entire places, long conversations, colors, objects, sounds, even small feelings that did not belong to waking life. And sometimes, while I was dreaming, I knew I was dreaming. I know some people hear that and immediately think it is nonsense. That is fine. I have no interest in convincing anyone. I only know what it felt like to me, and it felt real enough that it shaped the way I saw the world. As I got older, that sharp memory for dreams faded. Life has a way of wearing things down. Stress, routine, grief, work, years. All of it slowly grinds away at the strange parts of you until they start to seem childish or distant. Still, some dreams stayed with me longer than others. Or maybe they were not dreams. That is the problem, really. Time has eroded the details, but it has not erased the feeling. And sometimes feeling is the part that matters most. There is one memory in particular that has never fully left me. I must have been very young when it happened. Maybe 6, maybe 8. It was winter, I think, because it was dark much earlier than it should have been. That kind of heavy darkness you get in colder months, when evening feels like the middle of the night, even though it is not that late. I remember being at home with my mother. I do not remember where my father was. Maybe at work, maybe asleep in another room, maybe not there at all. That part is gone. But I remember my mother clearly, or at least I remember the feeling of being near her. Warmth, safety, the sound of her moving around the house. She always made a home feel full, even when it was quiet. The evening itself is broken into pieces in my mind. I remember being tired, but not ready for bed. I remember the kitchen light being dim, maybe because only the hood light over the stove was on. That weak yellow glow gave everything in the room a strange shape. Objects were still familiar, but they looked softer at the edges, stretched by shadow. The dark parts of the house felt separate from the lit parts, like they belonged to something else. I was in the kitchen, sitting near the table, drawing on a piece of paper. I used to do that for hours as a child. I could sit with a pencil and make little worlds on cheap paper while adults moved around me. My mother was cooking. I cannot remember exactly what she was making, but I think it was soup, because her arm moved in a slow, steady circle, stirring whatever was in the pot so it would not stick or burn. It was such a normal scene, a child drawing, a mother cooking, the quiet sounds of an ordinary home. Then something changed. That is the only way I can describe it. It felt as if time suddenly slowed down, not in a dramatic way, not like in films, but in a quiet, sick way. I could feel each second passing. I could feel the room becoming aware of itself. Even as a child, I knew something was wrong. Children know more than adults like to admit. They do not always understand what they know, but they feel it. I felt it then. A shift, a pause in the world. I looked over my shoulder toward my mother. She was still standing at the stove in her usual place. Her hand was still raised where she had been stirring. At first, it seemed normal enough. I think I even tried to tell myself that everything was fine, but then she twitched. It was small, barely anything, just a sudden movement in her shoulder, quick and unnatural. My eyes locked onto her immediately. Children notice changes in rhythm. When someone moves in a way they should not, it stands out even before you know why. I stared at her, and the moment I did, she froze. Not normal stillness. Absolute stillness. That is what frightened me first. A human being is never truly motionless, even when we think someone is standing still. Something always moves. Their chest rises and falls. Their fingers shift. Their posture changes. They scratch, swallow, blink, tilt their head, do something. But my mother stood there as if she had turned into a statue. Her back was straight, her arm was fixed in place, and the spoon or spatula in her hand did not tremble or lower. She looked carved out of the darkness. I remember wanting to speak. I wanted to ask her what she was doing. I wanted to say her name, but I could not. It was as if some instinct, deeper than language, told me that if I spoke first, something worse would happen. So I stayed in my chair and kept watching, my body slowly tensing without me telling it to. Then I heard it, a low growl. At first, I did not understand what I was hearing, because it did not belong in that room. It was an animal sound, deep and rough and wet at the edges. It came from my mother. I knew it did, even though my mind resisted that fact with everything it had. She started twitching again, only this time, it was not one quick movement. It was rhythmic. Wrong. Like something inside her was testing her body and pulling at it in small, ugly jerks. I remember how afraid I felt then, not because I understood what was happening, but because I did not. Watching your mother stop being your mother, even for a moment, does something terrible to a child's mind. There is no safe place left once that happens. Then she turned to face me. I wish I could forget that part. Her eyes were wrong first. Her pupils were so large that there was almost no white left. They looked black and wide and endless. Her mouth hung partly open, and thick white foam dripped from it, running down her chin and onto the front of her blouse, which was already soaked through at the collar. Her face looked like it was trying to remember how to be a face. There was recognition there, but twisted, like a thing wearing my mother and failing to copy her properly. She tried to speak, but what came out was not speech. It was noise, wet, broken sounds that almost formed words, and then collapsed into something else. Not language, not anything I could understand, just the rough sounds of a mouth trying to do the wrong job. I pulled my legs up onto the chair and covered my head with my arms. I remember making myself as small as possible. Children do that when they are scared enough. They fold inward, like if they can take up less space, danger will pass over them. Then she started moving toward me, slowly at first, the same strange twitching steps. I did not know what to do. I did not think I could run. I think I screamed, but I am not certain. Some parts after that are broken in my memory, like glass missing from a window frame. But I remember the sound of the kitchen door opening. I remember lifting my head slightly, just enough to look, and I saw my mother. That sounds impossible. I know, but that is what I remember. My mother was suddenly there at the doorway, entering the kitchen, while the other thing was still moving toward me. I can still remember the impossible confusion that hit me, even through the fear. A child's mind cannot make sense of seeing the person they fear and the person they need at the same time. The thing in front of me turned. The real one, or the one I believed was real, rushed forward. What happened next is blurred, but not completely gone. I remember my mother grabbing the creature by the head. I remember a violent struggle, the sound of bodies hitting cabinets and the floor, the growling turning louder and then rougher, and then more distant somehow. I shut my eyes again, because I could not bear to watch. I remember hearing the sounds instead. Furniture scraping, something choking, heavy movement, then muffled growls, then less and less. Finally, silence. That was almost worse. I kept my eyes shut long after the sound stopped, because I was terrified of what I might see if I opened them. I had always been afraid of looking up in the dark and finding something inches from my face, watching me. That fear was with me even before that night, but after what happened in the kitchen, it became something permanent. Then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I nearly cried out, but when I opened my eyes, my mother was standing there in front of me. The other thing was gone. I searched the kitchen with my eyes, without moving my head too much. I do not remember seeing any mess. No broken dishes, no blood, no sign of the struggle I had heard. Maybe there was some, and I have forgotten it. Maybe there was nothing at all. Memory is cruel that way. It keeps the fear and throws away the proof. My mother leaned down and wrapped her arms around me. She held me tightly against her chest. She did not explain anything. She did not say it was all right. She did not ask what I had seen. She simply held me. That silence stayed with me almost as much as the rest of it. I do remember waking later that same night, drenched in sweat. My whole body felt sticky and overheated. I lay there in bed, trying to calm my breathing, telling myself over and over that it had only been a dream. Children do that too. They take the most frightening thing they can imagine and force it into the shape of a nightmare so they can survive it. I remember convincing myself that whatever I had seen could not hurt me anymore because it had never happened. That is what I needed to believe so that I could fall asleep again. And for years, that is what I told myself. It was just a dream, an unusually vivid dream, maybe brought on by stress, darkness, a child's imagination, or the strange place between sleep and waking. I told myself that because the alternative was too large, too ugly, too impossible. As I got older, the memory faded around the edges, but it never truly disappeared. It would come back every so often, without warning. A smell from a kitchen, a certain type of dim yellow light, the sound of someone stirring soup in a pot. Then the image would return, my mother standing too still, the twitching, the growl, the foam at her mouth, the thing that looked like her but was not her, the second mother in the doorway. Even then, I kept calling it a dream. What else could I call it? But lately, I have started wondering if children understand more than they are supposed to. Maybe they see things adults train themselves to dismiss. Maybe they are close enough to fear, sleep, and imagination that reality has not yet learned how to fully hide from them. Or maybe I was only a strange child, with an overactive mind and a memory that held on to the wrong things. I have asked myself that question a lot these past few days. More than usual, because something has happened that makes the old memory feel less like a dream and more like a warning. I am sitting in the living room now while I write this. The house is quiet, too quiet. There is no television on, no music, only the soft sounds that all houses make at night, the tiny creaks and settling noises that are easy to ignore until you are afraid. My mother is here with me. She has been sitting across the room for a while now, in the same chair where she likes to rest in the evenings. At first, I tried to ignore the way she was looking at me. I told myself I was only remembering old fear and placing it over an ordinary moment. That happens too. Sometimes memory does not stay behind you. Sometimes it crawls into the present and waits there. But the longer I sit here, the harder it is to dismiss what I am seeing. She has not really looked away from me once. Her eyes are red, not bright red, but irritated and wet around the edges, as if she has not blinked enough, and her pupils keep widening and narrowing in a way that does not match the light in the room. They seem to be adjusting to something I cannot see. Her gaze does not drift. It stays on me. Not on my face exactly, but on me, with the same fixed attention that thing in the kitchen had all those years ago. Every time I tell myself I am imagining it, she twitches a little. Just once. Small, sharp, enough to make my stomach go cold. She has not spoken in several minutes. I have tried asking if she wants tea. I asked whether she was feeling all right. I even laughed once, just to break the silence and make myself feel ridiculous for being scared. But she only keeps staring. And every so often, I think I hear something low in her throat. Not a voice. Not yet. Just the beginning of one.